Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you from Film Fanatic headquarters. It's about 8:15 here on a Monday morning. This week is the start to Thanksgiving, the Thanksgiving holiday. So I hope everyone's doing good. I hope everyone has had a pretty fun weekend. So weather was pretty nice, and there were some cool things to do, and it was a great weekend. But today's show, like I've said before, and you know, with a lot of videos I do, I try to do some specialty videos of where I focus or talk about things that are not necessarily movie reviews or discussions, but they're topics or things that are very much connected to the world of film. So today's show is on a specialty thing where I'm going to talk about an experience I had yesterday, and it's also related to a video of some crazy news I had heard about. A few weeks ago to a month ago, I'd done a show about the big crazy news of Best Buy, which is a big, corporate franchise of Best Buy, basically announcing that they were going to be doing away with all of their physical in-store media. And the other part of that's probably even the most shocking was that they also said that even for their online sales, they were going to do away with the physical media. And they were going to continue to focus on more or less home electronics and gaming. But other than that, DVDs, Blu-rays, 4Ks are are going away for good, starting next year, 2024. And on one hand, that's not a surprise, but the biggest part I felt was the biggest was kind of a shock, was that even there there was not going to be any online catalog. Basically, no titles were going to be available online. So this whole topic has been discussed a lot with this big announcement from Best Buy. I have a long history with Best Buy. When I first got into film, as far as being a collector of movies, Best Buy was my jam. That was the place I would go. Before I got into before my habits kind of changed, or I started to dive deeper into collecting, that was the first my introduction or foray into movie collecting. Because when I was out of college, when I got out of college, and I had always loved movies. And then when I was in my 20s or so was when I started buying DVDs. DVDs at that time were the hot ticket. That was what people wanted for their entertainment. And of course, this all predated the whole streaming revolution and evolution to where we are now. But in hindsight, it's a long time ago. But then it's really not. And this show is going to be about how I've just seen changes happen as far as physical media and all things related to this topic. I've seen things change so quickly in just within a few months period. It's wild. It's crazy because this is a topic and a thing that is of near and dear to my heart. Something that I really really care about. Something I'm passionate about, and something that really does affect me. And it's also something that really inspires me. So it's a pretty big shift, and to be on this little bit of a cusp of seeing how technology, things move along quickly anyway, but to see this, for example, move so quickly at such a rapid rate, I can't compare it to anything else that I have ever seen, really, especially when it comes to technology. So this show is going to be about that, and really about how I've just noticed recently how things have changed, especially since this big announcement from Best Buy. And since I really got into and I was late to the game with buying Blu-rays. I was really reluctant for a while because of having to buy, well, taking up space, which is the biggest thing for people around physical media. And I one well to a degree, a major reason why we are at where we're at. I think there are reasons that are probably stronger for it, which I'll get into, and I have talked about before. But I, I had, by the time Blu-rays came about, I had been buying DVDs for quite a few years. How I, was really into, I was a full on movie fanatic, and I, always been a fan of films, but I got really into buying movies quite a few years ago, and it was all DVDs, and it was during the time when DVDs were the hot ticket. And the thing that was so cool about them and the sexiness around it was that I am a huge fan of special features, and there were so many great movies that were coming out that were beautiful packages loaded with special features. And so I, as I got more and more into film, I became really into learning the idea of or the ideas of how a lot of these films were made. So I would seek out lots of movies around that time. That's especially that were specialty packages, or there were where special features were included with a lot of these DVDs. And so, and then, 10 years or so of that, that's when Blu-ray came out. And I was, at that time, I had bought maybe two or three different versions of a certain film. Say, one example would be, say, one of my all-time favorite movies, the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I have, like, basically like five different copies of that movie on DVD and Blu-ray, and I have like three or four different editions of that film. One of my all-time favorite films, and I think one of the most important films in horror history and just in general. So I remember when, for instance, when I first bought it on DVD, I bought this, like, relatively cheap copy. It was brand new at the time, but it was a standard issue DVD. It was strictly just the movie, and pretty good quality. And I bought it, and I was just super excited that I actually owned it. And I got that, had that for a couple of years, and then it was announced that there was going to be a special edition of that came out, and then so that was going to have more bonus features. There was going to be a remastering of the movie, and so I remember buying that, and then I bought that, and then about 3 or 4 years from there, it was announced that there was going to be this basically like a steel book version of the film that was going to be, quote unquote, the definitive version of the film, where it was going to be packed with all kinds of features and totally restored, remastered, all new commentary and all these things. And it was a beautiful new package, so I ended up buying that as well. So, and I was happy with those purchases, but again, that was acquiring three different versions of the film. So, fast forward 10 years or so, as I was buying these movies, Blu-ray came out, and I was really reluctant to buy it because then that meant to buy into it because that meant I had to buy more versions of that same film. So that was my biggest thing about, that was the biggest reservation that I had around buying more movies, just because it was going to be, having even more copies of the same movie. So, and I was happy with the actual quality of these DVDs that I owned. But then, years after the Blu-ray craze hit, probably about 5 or 6 years after the Blu-ray craze hit. It didn't take off quite as big as big or as predicted as the Blu-ray as DVDs. It did kind of take over the market for a while, but it never replaced it. Not like how DVD, what DVD was to VHS. It was very popular. But I was late to the game, and then I eventually saw some Blu-rays, and I was really, really impressed. And then I was like, okay, I'm gonna buy some. And then probably about 7 or 8 years ago, I went full on into buying Blu-rays. And then, case in point, I came across a cheaper Blu-ray version of Texas, and then I bought it, and it was kind of a standard issue, but the quality was, I noticed, was much better. And then another year went by. There was another version of it where there was this collector's edition of Texas, so on Blu-ray. So I bought that, and that for me became like the definitive version of the film. So again, that's just an example of like one movie that I own. So that was the process I was going through as far as keeping up with technology and all those things, and my reluctancy. But now that, after kind of the Blu-ray thing kind of started to kind of fade away a little bit, that's when I got on board, and Blu-rays came down in price. Blu-rays at the time, like everything when it first comes out in the market, but Blu-rays at the time when they first hit, they were very expensive, and so that's just an example of, that's like kind of the example of the transition for me. But during the time that I was buying DVDs and started to really get into it, I was always going to Best Buy, and so they had an amazing selection. I bought a shit ton of movies, and it was great. It was such a fun thing to go to the shop, to go to the store. There was one in Bangor. There is one in Bangor, Maine, which is about an hour away, a little less from here. And it was great. It was wonderful. That's what started me as far as being a collector. And then 7 or 8 years later, I kind of discovered Bull Moose music, and then I got into Blu-rays, and then, I haven't stepped foot in a Best Buy in years. I can't remember the last time. It's been at least 10 years more since I've even been in a Best Buy. And then it became a thing. So whenever I was buying movies, I would only go to Best Buy because I felt like their selection was even better. I got into, when it came to buying movies, I got really into buying a lot of exploitation movies and harder to find movies that I had been rediscovering from back when I was a little kid. A lot of great low budget horror films in the exploitation world. So that became my focus, and then that's what I was doing. And then I go to Goodwill and still buy movies there because they would have a lot of really cheap Blu-rays, really marked down. So it became my regular way of buying movies, was just that. And just within 2 years ago, I saw an interview with Bill Lustig. Bill Lustig, who is one of my favorite figures in the world of exploitation. He's one of my favorite directors. He directed Maniac. He's responsible for all the Maniac cop movies. Vigilante, just an amazing figure. Maniac is my all-time favorite slasher horror exploitation movie. He retired about, I don't know, 15 years ago or so from making films and kind of moved into... he basically started a company called Blue Underground, which still does exist, and it's a boutique label. And basically what he did was, I look at it as where he kind of paid it forward. He started releasing movies that were inspirations for him back in the 70s and 80s and the 60s. Movies that he grew up on, and movies that really inspired his style as a filmmaker. So his company started releasing all of these like super underground exploitation gems, and during that time and also a few years before, there were companies that were doing that. And there was this explosion of all of these boutique labels that specialized in putting out all of these exploitation movies. A lot of European movies, Italian movies, American grindhouse films. I mean, you name it, across the board. And for about 5 years or so, there was this massive explosion. And the first company that really hit the market doing this kind of thing is a company called Synapse, and they were pretty much I believe that they're like the oldest company. They're over 10 years old. They were one of the first companies that came out and started putting out really good quality versions of a lot of exploitation movies. They started out with DVD, and then when Blu-rays hit, they made that transition and started releasing Blu-rays, and they became one of the biggest companies, and they still remain one of the biggest companies. One of the things that killed a lot of these movies initially, and the companies that were putting out, back in the VHS time and days, suddenly a lot of these movies were available to rent at video shops and to actually buy, but they were on VHS. And a lot of the hardcore collectors realized that the quality of a lot of these films was pretty bad, and a lot of these films were greatly affected by ratings board, especially like, say, the big thing called the video nasties. A lot of films were censored, lots of things were cut out of films, but you could get them on VHS, and you could own them. And so then, after years of that, a lot of fans were like, well, I want to be able to see the uncut version, say, for example, of The Gates of Hell from Lucio Fulci, but I can't find it, and the quality is really piss poor on VHS. So there was an outcry by a lot of the hardcore fans, and so Synapse capitalized on that and made this really great smooth transition when Blu-rays hit to go into Blu-rays, and then that became the thing. And within, I don't know, 7 to 10 years of that, a whole bunch of other companies came onto the market and were specializing in all these exploitation movies. My favorite company being Mondo Macabro, but there was a whole slew of companies that have come out. Arrow, Blue Underground, Synapse, so many companies. Severin being probably one of the biggest ones, probably the biggest one right now. And there was this renaissance, this explosion. Suddenly you could find all of these movies that were like movies that I saw as a kid, that were like wicked low budget horror films, movies that were totally obscure. Suddenly they were getting this royal treatment, and it was like amazing. And so that's when I really, really got into collecting, like hardcore, was when I discovered all of these new changes. And that's been going on for a few years. But about a year ago, I should say, I came across an interview from Bill Leswig where he was talking about this kind of crazy renaissance that we're going through, but he also felt the lifespan for this whole thing is not going to last very long. He was saying probably within 3 to 5 years, more or less, that this whole thing was going to probably go away. And he even felt that physical media, people owning movies, was going to kind of go away. So it was weird because I was really into buying a lot of these films, and I still am, but I had this sense of, well, kind of a sense of doom that all of this stuff was going to go away. And realizing, well, okay, just get on it while I can, get it while it's hot, but that this is going to be a fleeting period, and it's going to be gone within 3 to 5 years because of how the market's changing, and with how the whole streaming thing has changed everything. So, I always had this sense that this is not going to last, and especially after seeing that interview, I realized this is not going to last. And so, just within a couple of months, or a few months ago, or less than that, it was announced by Best Buy that they were going to be killing their physical media, as well, as far as also that also included their whole online department, which was a really big thing that I was really shocked by. Not surprised that they were going to probably do away with their in-store thing, but I was really shocked by that. And since that announcement, I have seen it change so much. I went to Bull Moose yesterday actually, and I noticed that I went to Bull Moose probably the last time I had been in there was probably maybe just shy of 2 months ago. And the there's a bunch of shops in Maine, a bunch of Bull Moose locations. The one I would always go to was Waterville. And I noticed the last time I had been in there that suddenly a lot of these titles, especially around the grindhouse in the grindhouse world, were gone, and that there were like suddenly there was a lot less. And I was like, wow, this is crazy. Like, what's going on here? And then I was there. I went to Bull Moose yesterday, and it was like, it was so fucking sad. Like there was nothing. I ended up getting two movies which I watched last night, and they were both fantastic. And I'm gonna do a review for them this week. But I was kind of horrified that like suddenly all of these beloved movies were literally gone, and there was nothing in the shop. As far as usually when I would go in there, there was like just an overwhelming and overabundance of all of these great sleazy exploitation movies. And they have a vast collection of all kinds of movies there. A lot of commercial films and foreign films and what have you. And I love all that stuff too. But when I go there, I try to focus on buying all the exploitation movies. And I just could not believe it on how all the titles were gone. And it was just like when it came to the when it came to that thing of like looking for exploitation world, movies in the exploitation world, it felt like I was in a graveyard. Like it was weird. It was super weird. And I walked out only with two movies, and they were cheap. On one hand, I saved money, but still, it was just like, what? Every time I would go there, I'd at least buy 4 to 5, sometimes more movies, at least average. And I could not believe it. I could not believe the shift and the change of how rapidly this whole thing has evolved. And I was talking to a friend about it last night, and he was saying on how like a lot of that stuff it's pretty predictable, like how that's happening, and seeing how that's going to happen. But he feels it's going to phase into where you'll just have to you would just have to go to the companies directly and just order them online, which I think is a thing and has been a thing. But with the news of Best Buy actually, you know, closing their online sales store too, to me that's very disheartening. So I don't even think in my heart of hearts, I almost don't. I don't. I'm not even hopeful for that. I don't know if that's even going to be a thing. And part of the magic for me is going to a shop, a physical place, and searching through the bins, searching through the aisles, looking at the artwork, holding movies, holding the CDs, holding books in my hands. To me, that's the fun part of it, searching and doing that. And now I see that experience is literally going away instantly. It's wild. And I did not think I would see it move and change so quickly since I started to feel that this was going to happen. But then, especially since the announcement of what Best Buy is doing, it has moved at such a rapid rate to where I honestly feel that the other thing that I noticed that I just found out a couple days ago, a lot of the movies that I have bought just within the last year or 2 years at Best Buy on Blu-ray are literally they are completely out of print and they don't exist anymore. There's a handful of movies that I bought totally on a whim, and I have fallen in love with them. And I found out the other day, that a bunch of these titles are gone for good, and they're not coming back. And I was just like, what? Crazy. And I've never seen anything grow and change so quickly in such a short increment of time for the worse. It's just wild. It's just wild. And in my hearts of hearts, I try to be a pretty optimistic person for the most part, but I'm also pretty misanthropic about a lot of things. But in my hearts of hearts, my first feeling, or the first feelings that I have around this whole thing is that I feel that by next year, I feel that all of these movies, the and my favorite, my most beloved genre of the horror expectation world, is going to literally disappear within a year or less. At this point, I almost feel like it's kind of happening now. As far as like going, just the idea of going to a shop and shopping for these movies, I feel like that's already virtually gone. I'm really curious. I'm gonna, in the next couple of months or whatever, I will. I'm not gonna go to Waterville anymore. Their music selection was still really good, but I go there for the movies, and so, I'm gonna, in my travels, I'm gonna check out some of these other shops that are still, usually have great selections, and if that means I have to travel a little bit further, fine. But I'm going to see if that's happening at these other shops because every shop is a little bit different. But in my hearts of hearts, I really think that this whole amazing thing is going to go away within a year. Like even I think online sales. And for me, I don't buy anything online. That's just me. I don't really buy anything online. And for me, the fun part of it, the part I enjoy it that I enjoy the most, almost even more than the actual movies, is going to a physical place and shopping through the bins and exploring everything and discovering all of these, amazing films, movies that I've seen, movies that I grew up on, and in movies I've never seen before. That whole magic, I feel like that actual experience is going away. And I feel honestly that is heartbreaking. And for me personally, it's one of the most enjoyable things that I have in my life. So it's very heartbreaking. And, so I don't know what the future holds as far as social media, but I do think that it's going to go away. I think, you know, things always have this thing of where it comes around full circle. And, I think there's a lot of people who do stream movies, you know, I think there is this thing of people are realizing, well, they don't actually own a movie. They don't actually own anything. So there is this claiming of ownership that I think people do crave. So that could bring back some of this desire to own physical media. But the main contributor to all of this, which I think is the main contributor, is this is just a fallout from all of these streaming companies. And on one hand, it's like, yeah, obviously, when you own physical media, it takes up a lot of space. But I mean, I think that's part of our nature as people. Like, whether we collect movies, we collect shoes, or we collect instruments, or we collect paintings, we're all kind of I think people are naturally, always in that space of whatever it is. They like to collect things or hoard things or hold on to things that they feel are physically of value. And so if they don't own a shit ton of movies, they own something else that takes up a lot of room. I don't really feel like it's really that at the end of the day, even though I feel that is a deterrent. And I understand that they don't have the space. But I think the main thing is that the biggest reason is just the convenience of being able to stream a movie on any on any and also any on every uh, device a person has, whether it's a laptop or an iPad, an iPhone, you know, there's so many ways to access material, to watch film and all these things. So, but I think it comes down to just the luxury of doing that, the accessibility, where people can on their break watch a movie on their phone, or if they're watching a series, a TV series that they really like, they can watch their entire, watch the show. I mean, recently, I got together with these two folks, and there was a bunch of time. We had this meeting, and with this guy, I had this meeting with this guy and this girl, and one of the guys that had come along with them, he was basically just kind of hanging out. He wasn't there for what we were trying to do, so he basically borrowed one of the person's phones and just hung out and watched this TV show that he really loves on his iPhone, and he was there for about an hour, and that's what he did. He sat in his car and watched his friend's iPhone and watched his favorite show. So it comes down to that. It's just the necessity or the convenience of that, and it's really, really easy. And I talked to my great friend Sean Russell about this whole thing last night, and was telling him about the experience and how I noticed this like dramatic change. Like, it's just kind of crazy. And he was saying, well, you'll probably come around to it. You'll probably come around to, like, the streaming thing, because there's so many great television shows, there's so many great original movies and great productions and all this stuff. And I kiddingly said, well, fuck streaming. I have no interest in it. And I was kidding, and I don't want to be an asshole about it. But I do have a pretty militant attitude when it comes to streaming. I think it's really, I think it's a thing of where people want things, which I can't blame them, but people want things quick and easy and cheap. People want convenience. People want to be able to do something at the convenience at their most convenient time, and being able to do something, say, in the comfort of your car, or doing something in the comfort of your house, or whatever. Basically, you kind of have control of the situation. And so people want things, and whatever it is, they want things really quick, they want things cheap, they want things now. And so I understand that. But I was telling my friend Sean about this. The number one reason I don't stream movies is, for me, it's the quality of the product. There is a huge difference between seeing a movie. If you see a movie on Blu-ray or 4K, or go to see a movie in the theater, you're getting that real immersive experience. Like, you're getting that unfiltered immersive experience. In my travels, when I've seen movies through streaming platforms, there is a compression that's used through this technology, so a lot of these things can be streamed. But what happens is there's a compression on all of these films that come out through these streaming services, of where it compresses all of the audio, the sound of the film, and it compresses all of the pixelation, the picture of the film, and it basically compresses everything to where it sandwiches everything down. And so, because of that, the quality of what you're watching is actually not very good. A lot of the times, the sound feels compressed, but the thing that I've noticed the most is, like, if there's in a film or a TV show, if there are scenes, it's like, say there's scenes of where there's lots of nighttime settings, or there's darker scenes. When you see something in that platform, from those platforms, it's so dark that you can't really see anything. It is the dark is so dark to where it feels like you literally can't see anything. And also, in my experiences, I've seen because of the pixelation being off that sometimes certain scenes are actually blurry. And with the sound, is everything feels like either it's really really loud or really really quiet. There's no dynamic range in the frequency of what you're hearing in the music. When you see something on Blu-ray or 4K, and especially if you see it in a theater, you're getting that full dynamic range. You're getting that full spectrum where it's not being filtered because there isn't this compression put on it. And just me being a film fanatic, a massive fan of films, I told him that that's why. That's it comes down to that's why I don't stream movies because I feel like it's not. I want that experience. I want that experience of full immersion. So to me, it's like a watered down version of that, and it's just not as good. It's just not as good. You know, it's like to me, it's like if you have the option of like having, say, I don't know, a glass of really really fresh uh, orange juice, as opposed to having a glass of this completely artificial glass or this completely artificial energy drink that is made to taste like orange juice. Like there's a clear difference in quality. That's how I mean that's just kind of a way I think about it, and that's how I look at the this the why there's for me a big discrepancy or a big divide in those two things. And I think too another complaint is that people don't want to buy movies and go to the theaters, especially the theaters, because it's people say, well, it's too expensive, and I don't want to be in a crowded theater with a bunch of assholes that are too loud and all these kinds of things, and I get that. Um, but mainly it's because of the expense, and I get that. Things are very expensive. Things are insane, but I feel that the public is being manipulated by a lot of these companies because they're given this. Uh, I think they're given this false sense of security that, well, if you pay for these streaming services, you're actually getting, you have, say you become a member to, you subscribe to Hulu, for instance, and you have 10,000 movies at your disposal, and you have so many movies, you have so many TV shows, which, at face value is amazing. You have so many options. But that person who is using that platform never actually doesn't own, if they really are into a film, they don't have the ability to actually own the film. And every time they watch the film, they have to pay again. And then now it's been announced too that there's going to be a major increase in pay in membership fees for all of these platforms. So I feel like in the big picture of things, you know, 2 or 3 months that go by after you've become a membership, I think that person's is actually having to spend way more money than if they went to see a film on, say, opening night, or bought that Blu-ray or bought that 4K, and they just bought it and then that was it. With this, they're having to continually pay for services, and I really do feel that the public is kind of being manipulated into thinking, well, it's easy and it's cheap. I don't think it's cheap. I think it's actually, in the bigger picture of things, it's very expensive. And the top of it all, a lot of these companies are just struggling. They're kind of crumbling because they can't compete with all these other markets, with this market right now. So it's a clusterfuck. It's a clusterfuck. So I don't know, but I will always love these movies. They will always be my favorite, and I will find them and track them down in some form or another. Even if that means having to adapt and change to, I feel like for me it's like you have to adapt to things. You can't stop this and be in denial of it. You just have to adapt to it. It's the new, it's part of this new dystopian age that we live in. And this affects everything. It affects everything. It affects everything as far as anything around social environments. For musicians, getting people to come to your shows, getting people to come out to your restaurant to eat when they have the option to eat at home and order food online, getting people to come to an event when they can watch your event through a streaming service or a streaming format in the comfort of their own home. Living through other people's pictures of their trip to Italy, or and feeling like that is satisfying your need rather than going to that place. It's feeling that you can connect with people further and quicker. Meanwhile, you can't really talk to somebody on the phone. I don't know. So this is Jason Dean. Thanks again, and we will see you next time. Peace.